framework. With a dynamic purchasing system, you can actually join it later on. So after it's up and running, provided you meet the, sorry, something funny is happening with the slides there. Provided you meet the criteria for the dynamic purchasing system, then you can apply to join it. So if you're thinking that you wished you'd gone on more frameworks, then take a look at dynamic purchasing systems and see whether you could possibly get onto some of these. I've definitely noticed that there's been an increase in organisations looking to do business with the public sector. One organisation from the southeast of England contacted me yesterday. I hadn't heard from them for probably a couple of years. A couple of years ago, they had been thinking about entering public sector bidding, and they've been waiting for the right opportunities, but they've decided that because of the situation at the moment, they would definitely want to get into public sector bidding. Question there from Liz Hillary: where do you find out about getting onto dynamic purchasing systems? Well, what to do is research that through something like, contracts.gov.uk, or if you're signed up to public sector tender notice alert services, take a look through there as well. You can also just do an internet search on dynamic purchasing systems as well, particularly for your sectors. There have been examples as well of the public sector just looking to do direct awards as well, and direct awards either through existing frameworks, or if they can establish that emergency circumstances apply, then they can do direct awards. Presumably they would still want to feel that they had a little bit of due diligence in what they were doing. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I think might happen in bidding once the lockdown is over. But I think it's fair to say that particularly as the lockdown will likely be finishing, hopefully within the next few weeks, we will see a lot of activity both in bidding, but also on the nation's construction sites as well. We're also hearing some examples of governments and housing associations saying, look, if you've got finished properties, then we might be interested in purchasing them. So if perhaps you are a private developer, you usually sell to the private market, but you have properties that are of the type that social housing might be interested in. I mean, obviously it's not going to be the 5-bedroom luxury detached, properties with the double garages, but if it's more like the sort of starter or low cost type housing, then the public sector could well be interested in that. Also watch out for innovation funding. The government is boosting Innovate UK, for example, as a delivery agency around innovation funding. So if anything that you're doing is innovative in terms of technology, manufacturing, scientifically, then take a look at the Innovate UK website, because there could be funds either available just now that you could apply for, or further funding waves opening up shortly with the new funding that the government has allocated. So we'll go to the next slide, please, Howard. This is a good time to organise your bid pipeline. You probably have a bit more time on your hands, perhaps, than you normally do. So it's a good time to be thinking about targeting clients, buyers, and opportunities, and preparing for the end of what I've put as this lockdown. Because what will happen is if the cases and death numbers start to rise again after the lockdown finishes, then you could expect perhaps further lockdowns. Hopefully they won't be quite as long as this one has been, or it's obviously been necessary, but hopefully it won't be necessary to have one quite as long again. But obviously there might be a bit of disruption ahead. Use search tools as well to identify contracts likely to be coming to the market. If you've got target clients, you might like to look and see in the public sector, a lot of them publish their procurement strategies, they publish their forward plans, and they also publish prior information notices, which you would get obviously through a tender alert service. If you have existing contracts with the public sector, then you've got something that perhaps you could get extended. So at a time like we're in at the moment, the government has passed or has allowed, and you'll notice this through things like Crown Commercial Service, they've allowed the public sector to extend contracts. So if you've got a contract at the moment, you thought maybe it was nearly coming to an end or it's only got 6 months left on it, why not approach your public sector client and ask them whether they would look to extend that. This is also, though, a time for pivoting your goods and services. I mentioned the company in the southeast of England that are now looking to get a lot more involved in the public sector. So be thinking about things like that as well. I mean, obviously, where local authorities have encouraged homeless people to come off the street and go into temporary hotel accommodation, it's going to be quite a thing to put the people back on the street. It's interesting, I think Andrew mentioned at the start that probably our travel arrangements might change after this. Probably lots of things are going to change, and perhaps even things that society viewed as acceptable, maybe they won't view that as acceptable anymore, because it could be that there's going to be several waves of corona, and even the existing strain of the virus that we've got, all the indications are it could be 6 to 12 months or even longer before that completely leaves. So that reminds us that it could still be around during the winter time. So again, housing is one of people's most basic needs. So we can expect, hopefully, to see that the government and the public sector more widely continues, and not just continues, but increases the investments that they are making into public sector housing. And when I say public sector, I include the registered social landlords, housing associations, registered providers, whatever they're calling themselves. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide, please, Howard. So where do you find these opportunities? I've just put a few examples there of places that you can find them. You'll find that Scotland has got its own one called Public Contracts Scotland. So does Wales, Sale to Wales, and there's one in Northern Ireland as well. You may also be signed up to some kind of tender alert service, like Contracts Advance is one example. It's also good to look at Crown Commercial Service. They are the procurement arm for the UK government, and a lot of their frameworks actually take in the wider public sector, or at least the wider public sector can actually use them. So if you take a look on there, you'll find that there's quite a number of upcoming procurements with Crown Commercial Service. So we'll move on now, please. It could be that you, obviously, if we're thinking about construction, we're talking about actually getting onto the construction sites. So that's maybe one that's not so, it doesn't lend itself so well to bidding at distance, but it could be that some of the professional services attached to construction might be able to be, and certainly if there's people on this call that are perhaps not related so much to the construction sector, then bidding at distance could apply. So COVID-19 is likely to bring permanent change, thinking about adoption of technology, remote working, perhaps not the same need to be local to deliver some goods and services. Could you deliver them at a distance? Think of as well where the big opportunities are going to lie. I mean, London is always the place where some of the largest opportunities are within the UK. But there was also within the Tory manifesto the idea of levelling up with the North. So it will be interesting to see whether the North actually gets to see greater investment as well. So it might be worth, depending which sort of part of the sector you're in, but maybe thinking about bidding at distance, winning work at distance, or maybe it's just that you're going to slightly widen your normal geographical footprint, and you might need to be prepared to maybe just go a little bit further away and to go where the opportunities lie. So we'll move on, please. So things that, once you get into the situation of writing bids, and I know that some people are writing bids at the moment because there are still some opportunities coming to the market. Very important now, I've just got a few slides that are things that are quite topical and things that you will need to deal with. So for example, how are you going to deal with financials? How are you going to deal with your financials? How is your organisation? Because one of the things that the public sector always do is they do a due diligence around the financials of an organisation, so credit checks, etc. What about working capital? And how are you going to be able to fund opportunities that you get? One of the benefits of the public sector is that they're a client that doesn't go bust. They're a client that pays, and they've certainly in recent years, and I've been around this sector for nearly 30 years, they in recent years have started to pay a lot quicker than they used to. But important that you've got the answers to how you're going to deal with the financials within the contract. It's not just within, you know, setting your tender price, but thinking about your whole organisation's financial position. Next one that we're going to look at now, please, is how are you going to deal with COVID-19. So COVID-19 is going to obviously bring restrictions, social distancing, quite difficult sometimes on construction sites because necessarily people have to work quite closely together sometimes, and often it could be like shared welfare arrangements, etc. So you've really got to think about this. Now, what I'd encourage you to do is be thinking creatively as well. So imagine that lockdown is over, you're now allowed to be doing work on your construction sites. You know, what are the opportunities for perhaps working longer? Now, you've got to be careful, obviously, because you don't want people getting overtired, but could you perhaps potentially work a couple of shifts so as maybe it's a different group of people are coming on board. There is a lot of daylight hours that we're moving into as we get near midsummer. So, but obviously it's got to have regard to neighbours and what the rules are, but it could be that you're on a site that perhaps is a little bit distant from neighbours. So is there opportunity for longer hours, but obviously watching things like the European Working Time Directive? Is there opportunities for weekend working? I would imagine that some of your staff and subcontractors may actually welcome the opportunity of earning more money, but obviously, as with all construction work, health and safety has to be the priority. You might also want to be writing about how you're going to deal with social distancing on your construction site, how you can deal with things like video conferencing, where maybe the client, where meeting perhaps in traditional meeting rooms isn't going to be possible. How are you going to deal with if lockdown has to come back again? You know, so it's things like that, and site security, etc. So there are things around COVID-19 that do have to be taken into account within your bid. And interestingly, we're working on a large professional services, construction professional services framework at the moment with City of Edinburgh Council. They have extended the bid deadline by about 10 days because they're going to be asking some questions about how the professional services will be dealing with COVID-19. So expect to see that becoming the norm. Next thing we're going to look at, I think, is Brexit. No, it's material supply first. Oh, right, material supply. Interesting article in Construction News yesterday. It was talking about that it's not just a case of, right, that's us back on site now. There are severe shortages within the supply chain, and they listed a lot of the different building material supply that has stopped or considerably slowed down. And of course, this is not like a tap that you can just turn back on and suddenly you've got a full flow. So things like plasterboard, bricks, mortar, internal doors, steel lintels, hard landscaping, PPE obviously is in high demand, concrete and aggregates, even the labour agencies. If you need to go to a labour agency to recruitment, a lot of them have almost closed down at the moment as well. So you need to be thinking about that as you're an organisation, but of course the clever organisations also write about it within their bids as well, and that will help them. Okay, is it Brexit next, Howard? Let's see. Yes, it's Brexit. So Brexit has happened, of course, but what has not happened is the trade deal. So we're still on the pre-Brexit European Union arrangements that we've been on for many, many decades now. They're scheduled to come to an end on the 31st of December this year. The government, we know, are hopeful of having a trade deal in place. However, that might not happen. So if we had the scenario that there wasn't a trade deal, or perhaps a bit of a partial trade deal that was maybe more like a string vest than a full garment. If it didn't cover your areas, then you've got to think about that. You've got to think about what happens if the currency markets, remember when the Brexit vote was taken, sterling immediately went down, I think, between 10 and 20%. So if that happens, materials become more costly, obviously, if you're getting them from overseas. And also, how do you get them if there isn't a trade deal in place? So one thing that we may see from COVID-19 perhaps is less reliance on the Far East, but it actually may take the country and the world generally quite a bit of time to develop some of the material supply manufacturing capability that doesn't always exist now within this country. So you need to think about that, not just from materials, not just from currency and the effect that it could have on your tender prices, but also on labour as well. So we've seen the 120 odd people that were flown across from Europe to do fruit picking. Where are you going to get your labour from, particularly at a time when there isn't necessarily the availability of flights, etc. So how are you going to deal with labour shortages? I mean, I was speaking to one construction firm down in London a few months ago. Most of their staff are Bulgarian, Romanian and Polish. And they were saying a lot of them were starting to go back home now because of Brexit and because of the currency and different things like that. So if you rely on a foreign labour workforce, or that's quite a large part of your workforce, you would need to put within your tender bid how you know, if that declined, what kind of scenario planning or stress testing you've got for that. Okay, what's the other thing that we need to deal with within our bids is the environment. Most of the public sector had declared a climate emergency. So therefore, we're starting to see that coming across a bit more within the tenders that are coming to the market as well. So sustainability and sustainability issues and are looming larger. So, and expect as well that because we've all benefited from the cleaner air and with the health benefits as well, expect to see sustainability and how you're working sustainably, how you are sourcing materials sustainably, that looming even larger than it has already. Okay. What kind of bidder are you, particularly for those who are maybe coming new to the public sector? What I would say to you is really think about what kind of bidder you are. And the easiest way that I can illustrate this is with the supermarkets, some of the only shops that are open at the moment. These supermarkets, these brands, we all know them very well. We know that they are a mix of price and quality. If you're prepared to pay for the quality of Marks and Spencer's and Waitrose, you will usually get very high quality. Some of the other shops, they are, perhaps major, like Iceland, major more on just being cheap. Some of the other ones are more value. Some of the other ones are mid-range, and perhaps Tesco's might be one of the best examples of that because they've got a finest range, they've got a regular range, they've got a cheaper range as well. So what are you? Because and how does all of this impact on bidding? Well, in the public sector, they have to, by law, publish their evaluation criteria, and that is always a mix of price and quality. So if something's 70% price, then they're not looking for a Waitrose or a Marks and Spencer's experience. If it's 60, 70% quality, then they obviously are. So you need to work out as an organisation where you would be if you were a supermarket. Where are you on the price quality split? And then smart bidding means that you don't really go for things that, you know, aren't, if you pride yourselves on high quality, high value, but you know competitively you are not the cheapest, then be very careful about going for bids that are very clearly weighted towards price. Okay, we'll move on. It's good also just to try and put a little bit of science around your bidding. So don't just say, well, that's a construction contract and we're a construction firm and it's in our area, so let's just go for it. Now that might be the right decision, but it is best to actually put just a little bit of science around what you're bidding. So this is just a simple template. You can invent your own criteria, what's important in your markets, what's important to you as a business as well. So this one has got a scoring out of 10, and it's got a weighting as well, depending on the importance of the individual criteria. If anybody's good at mental arithmetic, they'll have worked out that if you scored 10 on all these things, you would get 100 with this particular no bid decision tool. I'll just use one example. So existing relationship would be that you are an existing supplier to that client. The relationship is strong. You have done good work with them. They view you as a partner. You're not in any kind of adversarial relationship. They've even probably told you that this opportunity is coming to the market. They might have asked for your thoughts on it beforehand. But all of these things would probably make you a 10. What would be a lower mark? Well, a lower mark would be perhaps maybe a 5, is you know them a bit, you're a local firm, they maybe know about you, you've maybe met them once, so that might be a 5. 0 or a 1 is really, you've not really heard of them. You didn't realise that there wasn't any town housing association just a few miles from you, but you now do, and you're thinking about bidding, but you've not heard of them, they've probably not heard of you. Doesn't mean don't bid, but you have to put things like that into the decision-making tool. How do AMBid get an 80% win rate? Well, sometimes it's bidding less to win more. If a client comes to us and it's clear that they don't really have either the relevant experience or the company size or the depth or the bid readiness, then that may well be not the right opportunity or even the right time for them to bid. So you get high win rates. One of the ways, and there's quite a number of ways to get a high win rate. I'll talk about these in a minute, but one of the ways is to make something that approaching a scientific decision. So it should never just be the sales director who decides that you're going to bid something. That should be grounded in, is this financially advantageous for us? What are the risks? Is this deliverable for us? And is this the right opportunity at the right time for us? Of course, sometimes you'll still want to bid it anyway, even if you think it's not scoring very well here, because you want to get in front of the client or you want to understand the market, perhaps the price point, etc. So we'll go to our next slide. For the public sector, there's been a lot of research done around the number of people who are actually marking your bid, and the average is 5.4 people. Now remember, a firm of architects that came to us a couple of years ago because they were losing all their bids, couldn't understand why, because they were architecturally beautiful bids. The architects had written them, and they had written what they thought were extremely technical, very specific and creative as well, and beautiful bids, but they couldn't win anything. And they were always getting downmarked on the quality scoring. So they came to us, and what we helped them to identify was that the average public sector procurement panel has got 5.4 people on it, and they come from a range of disciplines. So in the architect's case, probably only one of them was actually perhaps a qualified architect or from some kind of design service. So the other people, procurement could be involved. They're always involved somewhere, either on the panel or facilitating it, making sure that the organisation stays compliant with the legislations and also with the client's own standing orders around procurement. Finance are usually there as well. If it's housing, then you could expect somebody from the housing department, perhaps somebody in a strategic development type role for housing. There may, if it's housing associations you're bidding to, they often have resident board members. So you could have residents on that panel as well, and they may have some different motivations to what the professionals might have. You could also get legal, HR, health and safety. You know, some of the panels can be very large. We've seen panels in the NHS sometimes around the 20 mark. Okay, we'll move on, please. So the obvious point from that is just that your bid, the bid responses have to be written in a way that they would appeal if you were, you know, perhaps a finance person or if you were a housing person. So it's not just the construction elements that are important. How to make your bid stand out. I'm not going to cover all of this because I do want to leave time for Q&A with people. And I think Howard mentioned to me earlier on, he hopes that people might be prepared to share their video as well. You can start the video when they're asking the questions so as we can see them. But if not, obviously, as long as we can hear them, or you can ask the questions through the Q&A. So what's important? Well, these client hot buttons on the left, be thinking about as well. So if you're bidding perhaps to a local authority, you're not just bidding to the London Borough of whatever, you're bidding to their residents, their communities. So you need to show that you're thinking about all of that within your bid. How do you get the high scoring marks? You know, some bidders come to us, they say, oh, we can only seem to get a 6 or a 7 or sometimes an 8 out of 10. We can never get 9 or 10. Well, it's these things that are on the left there, the managing risk, the innovations, the added values. That's what they're looking for. The win themes in construction, there's always been 3, but more recently, of course, with Grenville, there's been 4. They're looking for better, faster, cheaper now and safer after Grenville. Better, faster, cheaper. Sometimes people say, well, you might get 2 out of 3, but you won't always get 3. The story you've got to tell, though, is that you are going to be all of these things, and maybe not all of them the whole time and everything, but on certain key things you will be better, and perhaps other things you'll be faster, etc. Have these win themes coming through, percolating through your bids like the chorus of a song or a golden thread. Really think about what is different about your services. So do you have USPs, unique selling points? What is your customer value proposition? So that's not just what you're good at, it's what that means for the client, but also their residents or service users, whoever is going to be benefiting from what you're doing. Most important point on this slide is the bottom right. What can you guarantee? So bids are often, bids can be won because somebody guarantees it. So when I worked in local government and was involved in marking bids, you know, we tended to discount when organisations said we will strive to, we hope to, we will aim to. You know, we just didn't give any credit for that. But so, for example, somebody saying we will aim to have 10 apprentices during the life of this 4-year contract. Somebody saying that we will have 1 apprentice a year, and definitely it's been costed in. They're going to go to the local college, and you mentioned which one. You know, they're going to go day release. They're going to be there on a Wednesday in year 1 or whatever. Really bringing it to life, that will score you points. So it's thinking right through your bid. What can you guarantee? Okay, our next slide, please. Being careful as well to watch for what we call the bid own goals. And this is where you score things, you know, or down mark yourself. Not answering the question, you know. Be very careful when you're cutting and pasting information from previous bids. It's very easy to, you know, to get the wrong client name in. If you do that, one of our colleagues who used to work in procurement, he said that they would stop marking the bid. That was at one of the large county councils in the south of England. They stopped marking the bid because they said, oh, it was written for a different client. Be as specific as you can, not generic. There's a few other things I'll just mention briefly there, contradictions in the bid. So that can often happen where you salami slice a bid. You say to somebody, oh, you do know about health and safety, you write that, and you write about, you know, subcontractors, and then somebody else writes about something else. And actually, you know, not only does it not read coherently, but there can be contradictions. I'll mention two more, the imbalanced response in the top right. So maybe the question is asking 3 points, you to cover 3 points, and you've got 1,000 words. Just watch you're not writing 700 words on point 1, 200 in point 2, and 100 in point 3. You might want to clarify with the buyer, how is this going to be marked? Are they expecting you to give equal amount of space to the 3? Because if they are, and you were to spend 700 words on one of the points, inevitably you'll probably score well for that one, and of course not score so well for the other ones. Double bidding is maybe when you're in a large organisation and perhaps some kind of central team is bidding it, but also a local team somewhere is also bidding it. So the same bid is going in twice from the same organisation, sometimes saying different things and at different prices. So you definitely want to watch that. Okay, we'll go on, please. So this is us moving towards the final slides. The hints and tips, I'm just going to pick 2 here. Number 6, review your bid in plenty of time before the submission. Okay, so that's 3 pairs of eyes looking at your bid. We always recommend 3 pairs of eyes. Usually people may be at different levels in the organisation and coming from different backgrounds. So you've perhaps got the construction background person, you've got the person, the sales lead on this business development, but you've also got somebody perhaps with a commercial hat on. So as I say, different people. If you open up to too many people, you can almost sometimes get too much noise. So just be careful with that as well. And somebody says, put something in, and somebody else says, take something out. And, you know, you're wondering, you're hearing a sort of cacophony of sound on it. The final point is in the bottom right, encourage all staff to think bid. We get brought in by all kinds of organisations, and sometimes at the first meeting, we're meeting directors, and that is good, but you know, a lot of the best information is out on the site. We want to speak to site agents, we want to speak to project managers, we want to speak to resident liaison officers as well, to really find out what is happening on the contracts, because that can be like gold dust within your bid. But also if these people are getting commendations, emails, cards sent to them, that needs to find its way back to the bid team. And also if you've overcome problems, perhaps worked through a problem that a client has had and really helped them, you've developed a really good solution there. All that sort of stuff works extremely well within the bids. Okay, so I think we've got about 10 minutes to go, and we're getting pretty close to the question slide. This one is, when should you seek expert bidding assistance of the type that AMBid can give? There are other companies out there, but I couldn't possibly recommend them, although I'm sure they're all very good. But AMBid encouraged you to think about talking to us because of our experience in the market. It might be it's a must-win bid, you're entering new markets. Some organisations just now are contacting us because they've got more bids than they can cope with, and sometimes it's just one bid, but their bid person is furloughed. But bids, we are saying that we do think there's going to be, a bit of a bidding frenzy within the next few months as lockdown, as we come out of lockdown and as more opportunities come to the market. We have a full range of bid services, from bid writing, management. We can supply you with staff, we can help you with bid recruitment, we can train your staff, and of course staff can be trained during furlough as well. And we also handle funding applications as well. We provide a review and comment service, which is very popular as well, where perhaps you do have bids written in-house, but you would just like them to get a final look over before they're submitted, and a few more ideas for how the bids can be strengthened. So we'll move on then. And that is time for the questions now. So thank you for listening. I hope you found it helpful, and I look forward to hearing some questions.
You've got a couple there, Andrew, on the Q&A menu that you might like to take first. Okay. One's from Chris Meadows, one's from Dan. Would either of these two like to show their hands, and I'll bring them in on screen? So if you show your hands, if you want to, I'll open it up and you can join on screen. Okay, Chris, I've opened you up. Lisa Marie Brown, she's got some questions, so I'll promote to a panelist as well. You'll just need to control your microphones. Well, 3 people have now joined you, I think, or should have done.
Okay, so could we start with Chris, please, because I can actually see you.
Of course, no worries. Hopefully you can hear me as well.
Yes, I can.
Excellent. Hi, so my question is from the sort of client side. All the things you've mentioned about the presentation have sort of suggest to me that there's an awful lot of unknown. It's very difficult for people to price contracts at the moment. Coming from the point of view where we're otherwise would be looking to invite bids for upcoming projects, it makes us a little uneasy about where that risk is going to be, who's effectively going to be shouldering that cost. So the question really is about when is the most prudent time to invite bids for upcoming projects, and at what point is there likely to be any sort of settlement on costs or any sort of clarity? Difficult question to answer, I appreciate. But if you were in my shoes and we've got a few things to go out, how long would you be holding off for, or would you be holding off at all?
I would be thinking about, spending time just now getting your tenders ready, and perhaps getting them ready to come to the market after lockdown this initial period of lockdown is finished, or even before it finishes. It might be that government will start to signal quite soon. They might start to say, well, by a certain date, provided certain criteria are met, then the lockdown could be finishing. We are seeing quite a lot of public sector organisations still procuring. Just to go on to the specifics of your question though as well, Chris, what I'd say is that we're probably going to be in pretty uncertain times between COVID-19 and Brexit for, anything up to 6, 12, 18 months. So the public sector has budgets that they have to spend. They've also got a responsibility, I would suggest, to be stimulating the market as well, because there's lots of evidence to show that, money that's spent, for example, in the construction sector, every pound that's spent goes a lot further than just that £1. As far as what's going to happen on price and who's going to take the risk, what I would say is you can have effective change control provisions within your contracts. So, for example, you may have prices for a year, and then you may say that, what are the change control provisions for repricing, after a year? And perhaps it's going to be linked to, the CPI, or perhaps some kind of construction index that would perhaps make sense. But provided that change control provisions are within your contract and that they're not completely weighted in your favour, because that may mean that if it's completely weighted in the public sector's favour, then the private sector firms may decide that they're not going to apply for that opportunity. That opportunity perhaps presents too much risk for them. And we do see examples of the public sector wanting to hold all the cards, wanting to be able to stop contracts at will, and wanting to not provide any price increase mechanisms as well. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of assistance.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so the other people we're seeing, Lisa Marie first and then Dan, please.
Yeah, hi, thanks for your presentation on procurement. I really enjoyed it. It's very useful. Just a quick question really. There's quite a lot of mixed messages from the construction industry what businesses are allowed out on site, which ones aren't. Some sites are restarting. Do you think that us as industry need to talk to government more to get a clearer understanding on when lockdown will be lifted? So I'm not saying exact timescales, but what's your view on that? And do you think that we should be doing more in terms of industry to encourage the government to look at, timescales around that?
Yeah, well, I'm quite sure the industry is, trying to do things, Lisa. This is difficult because you're actually dealing with, obviously, the health crisis being the most important thing. And there were some examples of construction firms not working safely under the sort of social distancing that needs to be in place. So that probably has caused concerns. I think the government, though, and I've included devolved governments here as well, I think they recognise that getting the construction sector moving again is going to be pretty key to getting quite a lot of other sectors moving as well, because the construction sector people go out and spend money, in shops, and they use transport and different things as well. But all of these things can sometimes carry a risk, obviously, of spreading corona as well. It would be great to think that there was a vaccine, but that sounds like it's quite a long way off. Maybe antibody testing will be the way to go, because maybe quite a lot of people have actually had it. I had a mild dose and could be okay, but who knows? I think as soon as lockdown is over, I think you would expect to see, large parts of the construction sector getting moving again. But you might have to be prepared to do it sensitively as well, because there could be people who've got very good reasons why perhaps that they aren't well enough to come to work, or don't want to put either themselves or a very vulnerable family member at risk as well. So there's just all of these considerations.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, Dan, please.
Yeah, thanks for that. Probably not the most feted and tender expert writer, but one of the things that's been brought to our attention a lot, and it was something that Noble Francis brought up as well the other day, in regards to sort of stable demand for the off-site sector, for modern methods of construction and everything else. Obviously, it needs a stable pipeline. So to achieve a stable pipeline from a public sector's perspective, if they wished to procure something of a specific concept or a product of that nature, how would they, and if they've obviously done their own due diligence on that product, how can they go about the procurement without going through bid, OJU, tender, frameworks and everything of that nature? So how can they partner to allow to give that consistent pipeline to an off-site provider, for instance? Because at the end of the day, it also plays part of collaborative working.
Yeah, what I would say first of all, Dan, is don't fear the tender process. Because the tender process, provided you get specific help as well with the tender process, you should be able to do well out of it. The public sector's got powers at the moment, sort of emergency type powers, let's say, because of a situation, to bypass some of their normal procurement rules. So if you've got a good relationship with a public sector organisation, and I include housing associations, even though they're not exactly public sector, but if you've got a good relationship, then why not go to them and say, look, here's an opportunity that you could perhaps use some powers that you've got at the moment to provide us a contract. Now, if they were going to provide you a contract, they'd have to be, feel some kind of comfort that that contract is a fair price, that there's going to be, the necessary quality, etc., that you've got the correct experience as well. So I would imagine you'd probably have to design something that was a bit like a tender response, but that may be able to get you that contract with the public sector under the current circumstances.
Do you think that would just be current circumstances, only the fact that most people they're undertaking one-off schemes, classifying them as a prototype, because that in effect gets beyond? Is there something that's a bit more long-term?
Well, there are limits as well, procurement limits. So, for example, if it was goods or services, I think the limit's something like 174,000 in England. If it's a works contract, it's a way up to near £4 million. So there are opportunities that they can not go through a full tender process, but if they're awarding contracts in the hundreds of thousands or even the millions of pounds, they will go through some kind of process, and they're probably going to go out to at least 3 organisations. So yes, you want to have a good relationship with your public sector potential partners, but you need to recognise as well that, you know, they have to be seen to be going through some kind of procedure.
Thank you.
I think that is us time-wise and also question-wise, so I'll hand back to Howard. And thank you, Howard, for helping with the slides.
Okay, thanks very much. I'll just ask once more, if anyone does have any more questions, I'm sure we could probably take 1 or 2. If you do please put up your hands and I'll open you up. But if not, I'm going to hand over to Andrew to hopefully now be able, without too much technical difficulty, to give his thanks.
Okay.
And just remind you that we have an event coming up on Friday, which I hope people are registering for. We also have a special event this Thursday, which looks at an interesting thing, because it's St George's Day, which won't please a Scotsman who's listening. But we've decided that it would be a good idea if we try and invite someone along who's got a bit of a different experience of life. And he's a former Royal Marine who's rowed a couple of oceans in his life. A very interesting experience to talk about isolation, resilience, leadership, etc. So please do register, and the profits in this are in aid of the NHS charity and the Royal Marines charity. So with that, I'll hand over to Andrew. Many thanks indeed.
Yeah, thank you, Howard. So all it leaves me to do is to thank Howard and John for organising today's webinar to emphasise what Howard's just said about future webinars. We have a one-off this Thursday, as he's outlined, but also the next one in this series is on Friday on legal matters, and then every Tuesday and Friday for those of you that find it useful. But finally, of course, and the biggest thank you today to you, Andrew, for giving of your time and knowledge.
Thank you.
And just leaves me now to wish you all a very good day. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew. People will start logging out. I did record it. Did you record it yourself or not?
No.
I did record it, but I didn't get the beginning of it. So I apologise for that, because I was fiddling around with the slides and trying to get Andrew sorted out as well. So there will be a recording. And if you don't mind, the slides you sent down we'll post on the site so that people can go there if they wish.
Yeah, what I might do is just take a few of the slides off it, which are particular IP
Well, if you'd like to do that.
So, yeah, I'll do that,
Yeah.
and then send you a version, Howard, that you can use.
Okay.
If that's okay.
That's super. Thanks very much. I see Dan's hanging in. Do you want to say something, Dan?
No, I was, yeah, I wouldn't mind just catching up with Andrew at some point, because the reason for the question was actually not because of my engagement with the supply chain. It's actually the question that comes from the housing associations directly. And it is one of the questions that I have asked, definitely in the world of offsite manufacturing. Do they require to have let's say, an equitable share in an organisation for them to go through that procurement method? It's just very interesting. Most of the financial aspects of within a housing association that I have asked don't have the internal answer, but they're seeking that answer. So it isn't me coming from a supply chain perspective with that. It's actually asking that question on behalf of the housing association procurement team.
Okay, yeah, happy to catch up separately.
Yeah,
on
brilliant.
that, Dan.
Obviously, I'm part of the board of the CE anyway, so I'll touch base with Howard and Andrew Carpenter, and then maybe we'll get in direct contact. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. Anyway.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll close down in a minute then. Okay, I'll say bye-bye and close down.
Thank you, Howard.
Okay, thanks very much indeed. Hope to see you again soon.
Okay.
Bye.